And in the morning, they'd wake their sheep up, pull them out of the cave, and then they'd go spend their day about in the fields. And at night, they would come back to the cave again. These shepherds would share space with other shepherds, and so that you had all of these shepherds' sheep commingled together in a mass of mutual sheep. Now, today's solution for that is to take a brand and sear the logo of the sheep herder onto the back half of the sheep, or to put some sort of tag in the ear. That is not what they do here. The shepherd had a specific call that the shepherd would use, and that if your sheep was in the sheepfold, all the sheep would get up when they heard your call, walk out of the pen, and follow you wherever it was you went. Now, if you're like me, you say, well, how does that work? There's this conversation about thieves and robbers, and if I was a thief or a robber, and I wanted to take your sheep, what would you do? Yeah, imitate the call. If you just holler, all you have to do is figure out a way to mimic the holler, mimic the sound, mimic whatever it was that the shepherd did. The shepherd would call, the sheep would follow, and if a mock voice came, all the sheep ran away. If there was a voice that imitated the shepherd, they ran away. Now, I don't want you to make a big mistake this morning. The pastor's voice is not the same as the shepherd's voice. Sometimes people get that confused. They think that the pastor's voice is equal to the shepherd's voice, and that's not the case. I want you to know that sometimes there are shepherds that don't get the voice right. I've been getting phone calls and emails from individuals that are concerned if the world is going to end on Saturday at 6 p.m. Have you heard about that? Somebody has just spent their entire life savings to share with the world that the world is going to end of a catastrophic earthquake on May 21st at 6 p.m. This pastor is doing this. And he's not sure if he's even going to make it to heaven. The world is going to be destroyed by this earthquake at 6 p.m. on Saturday evening. Eastern Standard Time, or whatever, Eastern Time, or in daylight, or whatever it is. People ask me, Pastor, what do you think about that? Well, I don't know. I'm not going to disparage this minister for saying what he's saying, but I do know that the pastor's voice is not the same as the shepherd's voice. And I know that the shepherd has seen this book. And nowhere does the shepherd say, I'm coming on May 21st at 6 p.m., the year 2011. In fact, it says the shepherd doesn't know that. The shepherd at least self-limits himself from knowing that. And so I'm pretty sure if the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the creator of the heavens and the earth doesn't know that he's coming on May 21st at 6 p.m., that probably this minister may not know it either. Here's the question. With all the voices that are calling out to Christians today, including pastors, is there ever a time in your life when you can point to saying, I am going to follow the shepherd with a capital T and a capital S? If so, are you still following the voice of the shepherd? Whose voice are you listening to? Whose the voice? What is the voice? Whose voice is it that captures your imagination, that motivates you to live, that motivates you to be engaged in this world that God has created? What is it? What is the voice that you give attention to? At what moment in your life is there any attention given to the voice that calls, the shepherd's voice that calls? Is there anything in your life that motivates you to listen to that shepherd's voice? The music industry is calling. The television industry is calling. The fashion industry is calling. Relationships are calling. Your cell phone is calling, for that matter. But when do you listen to the voice of the shepherd? Ken talked about reconnecting to the shepherd through devotions. Is there anything in your heart that motivates you to spend time with the Almighty during the week? Whose voice are you listening to? Don't just come to church on Sunday and say, I'm going to listen to the pastor's voice. Yes, I try to faithfully represent the shepherd. But there is a difference between listening to the pastor who represents the shepherd and listening to the shepherd. Are you listening to the shepherd? The second thing that amazes me in this text is what I discovered in some of my research that I've already alluded to today. When it was time for the sheep to go to bed at night, the shepherd would give his little hoot and a holler, and the sheep would follow him. The sheep would follow him to the entrance of the pen, and then they would get kind of bunched up, because the shepherd would examine each of the sheep as they came into the sheepfold. And if the sheep was doing okay, that particular sheep was doing okay, the shepherd would let the sheep continue on. But if there was anything wrong with the sheep, he would set that sheep aside and he'd come back to that sheep in a moment. And all the sheep that had been scratched by a thorn or had some kind of wound or was bleeding in some way, the shepherd would take that sheep aside, and after all the rest of the sheep had gone through, the shepherd had oil in his pocket. And the shepherd would take that oil, rub it in his hands, and whatever healing properties were attributed to that oil, the shepherd would rub onto that wound and seek to cleanse those wounds, so that way that the sheep would not get any infection and would heal appropriately and well. The shepherd would heal the sheep with oil. There is no wound of the heart, folks. No wound of the mind. No pain in your body except that which the Lord knows about. I believe that over the past 4 or 5 weeks, while I've been doing the things that I've been doing, that the Lord was there with his strong hand, keeping my spine in place. Allison knows something to this, don't you, dear? Despite all the health stuff she's been going through and needing to have surgery on Wednesday, the presence of the Lord has been with her. Well-known theologian Charles Hodge wrote about this story. He said, "It was my privilege to be the pupil assistant of Professor Joseph Henry, the illustrious scientist. When for the first time electric signals were sent from point to point, the earth itself was being used as the return current, and Professor Henry put me at one end of the circuit, while he stood directing the experiments at the other. He said, I can well remember the wonderful care with which he arranged them. Very often when the testing moment came, he would raise his hand in adoring reverence and call upon me to uncover my head and worship in silence. He would say, quote, because God is here, I'm about to ask him a question." Here's a scientist that saw electrical currents as a conversation with God. He saw that everything that God did and everything that God was doing through the world of science was a way that God was having a conversation with his creation. And I don't know what you're dealing with today, but you know, everything that we face is an opportunity for God to speak to his creation. Everything that we encounter from day to day, each of the physical challenges that we encounter, each of the occupational challenges that we encounter, are an opportunity for God to speak to us, are an opportunity for God to have an encounter with his creation. You don't have to be brave, do you? You have to trust. You don't have to have a dry eye free of tears, but you do have to believe. You don't have to be immune to feelings, but you just have to hold his hand, trusting that the shepherd is going to take care of you. There's so many ways in which our Heavenly Father works through situations. We can look back and give him praise. I shared with you my story. How is it that I'm not supposed to lift but a couple pounds, and you can lift all that furniture and no harm come to your body? How is that? I don't know what your week has held. I'll tell you what I want to do this week. I want to wrap my body in bubble wrap. And I want to lay on the couch and do nothing until May 23rd. Somebody can bring me my computer and I'll do my biblical research for next week. They can wheel me down front here in my bubble wrap. I'll cut myself open with the bubble wrap, preach a message, and then wrap myself back up again, and they can wheel me into the operating room on May 23rd. If that happened, I would be okay. A little nerve-wracking in my world right now. The wonder if you're going to turn or fall or forget to lift something. I was laughing. Well, I wasn't laughing. I'd gone to Giant Eagle. And you get fuel perks at Giant Eagle. And I believe in utilizing the entirety of the fuel perk that has been allotted to you. So the fuel perks allotment is 30 gallons. So I wait till my truck gets to a certain point, and then I know that I get at least 23 gallons into my truck, and then at that particular point, and then I take my 5-gallon gas can and 2.5-gallon gas can, and then I fill it all up. I use all 30 gallons, and I've just saved the maximum amount of money allowable by Giant Eagle. Well, I had 20 cents fuel perks, so I did that, and I filled everything up and filled the 5-gallon one completely full, filled the 2.5-gallon one a little full, and closed everything up, and then I went to reach for this 35-pound object. And that's exactly what I did. I went, "You've got to be kidding me." I won't tell you what I did. There was no one around. No one to help me. I could have waited. Folks, the shepherd wants to touch your life. In this story, he uses oil, and we're probably going to end, we are going to end the service today. Because I know that there are folks like Allison being one of them, that would like to come forward and meet the shepherd today. We're going to let her do that. But there's one more thing I see in this story that's really awesome. The shepherd would lie down in the doorway when the sheep all got in there. Now, why would he do that? Why would the shepherd lay down in front of the doorway? There's a very important reason why. If the shepherd laid in the doorway, in order for something to get to the sheep, you had to literally go over the shepherd. If you were a coyote, you had to walk over the shepherd. If you're a wolf, you got to walk over the shepherd. If you're a thief or a robber, you got to go through the shepherd to get to the sheep. And the shepherd, by placing his body where he put it, said, "I will lay down my life to protect my sheep." Now, Jesus contrasts this in this story with a hired hand. Now, when a hired hand comes in, he may lay down in front of the gate, or in front of the entrance to this sheepfold. But if trouble comes, if they hear a coyote, if they hear a howl in the distance, if they hear the leaves rustling and somebody's coming to get the sheep, what does the hired hand do? The hired hand gets up and runs away. Jesus is saying, I'm not going to do that. I am not a hired hand. I'm going to lay down my life in front of my sheep. There's a story of some missionaries who were working in the New Hebride Islands. John Patton was a missionary there. And some hostile natives surrounded the mission station. Now, in the mission station at this point in the ministry, they had built the thing. It was a very small thing, and he and his wife were the only ones to occupy this mission station at the time. They hear these natives coming, and they were convinced that the natives were out to kill them. They had torches and